If you could choose one area on the globe to build the industry that powers the modern world, you would not choose this island. Tall mountains running down one side, pushed to the sky by the ever-shifting plates underneath that make up the Ring of Fire, waiting for the inevitable earthquakes that sprout from it to rattle your factories. Factories and gear that require impossible precision, down to the atom. You would not place it here, where water is surprisingly scarce. Your factories will need the same amount of water as San Francisco every day. And you certainly would not choose to place it just 100 miles away from your eternal enemy, frequently and aggressively vocal about their intent to invade you. Warning shots, missiles have already passed overhead or splashed into the ocean just miles off your coast. Yet in one small area of this one unremarkable island sit the factories that breathe life into the wires connecting every piece of the planet. This is the story of how Taiwan engineered its survival, turning weakness into unmatchable strength that no one has been able to copy, exactly because they do not have the pressures and the reality of Taiwan's physical world bearing down upon them. This video is sponsored by Public.com. More on them later. Taiwan does not exist. What you see in its cities, what you hear in the mountains, what you smell in the air, it's not Taiwan. It never was. It never will be. Don't say the name. Abandon your embassies. Erase it from your statements. That is the official position of 142 countries, where we must start, because not only is the story fascinating, but the Taiwan is China, not Taiwan tension is the whole reason we're here. So before we do anything else, here's the short story that surrounds the tension. As a bonus, we get to enter the mindset that pushed an island which shouldn't be important to become powerful. From here, going all the way back forever, the island of Taiwan was not ruled by anyone. Nobody claimed it. Nobody wanted it. There was nothing about the island that was attractive. Jungle and mountains on one side, plains on the other, it was fine. There was a trickle of immigrants from mainland China, but there was no desire to have the island be part of the greater Chinese kingdom. So to say it was independent this whole period would be overstating it. It was indigenous people of Polynesian descent in small villages, subsistence farming. There was nothing to declare independent. It just was. It wasn't until here that China reluctantly annexed it. It wasn't until here that China made it a formal province, just in time to hand it over to Japan after losing a war with them. China took it back after Japan lost World War II. Just to be extra clear about some of these details, a few years before Japan took it from China, Japan had sent a few thousand soldiers to the island to punish the indigenous people who had slaughtered the crew of a Japanese boat that shipwrecked on the shore. China got word and was like, "What's up with that, Japan? That is our island." Japan goes, "Why don't you control your people then?" China says, "Well, actually, we don't really control that island," making an official statement saying the Aboriginal territories were outside the sphere of civilization. Japan says, then that land, according to the rules, technically isn't yours. So yes, Japan took it from China, but it's not quite the same as if France demanded the bottom half of Italy after Italy lost World War II. Anyway, Japan loses World War II, so China gets it back just in time for the Chinese Civil War to flame up and then solidify into a conclusion that dramatically altered the makeup of global power for the next century. Because the losing party of the Civil War, the party in direct opposition to today's ruling Chinese Communist Party, made themselves at home 100 miles off the coast on the island of Taiwan. They took all the gold and silver reserves that China had, all the foreign currency, and escaped on boat. Just imagine if the U.S. Civil War had ended and the Confederates took all the money and set up their own country in the Bahamas. This would not be a settled issue in the United States. Of course, there's tension between mainland China and Taiwan, but it gets even crazier. I remember the first time hearing this. What? Really? And realizing that Taiwan is a classic Cinderella story and at this point is in the carriage headed to the ball. The United Nations was designed to be the world police. It was the first real international body with muscle. Decisions were legally binding. It could sanction, authorize force, could use its own troops. The only thing standing between the UN declaring something and it happening was the Security Council. United States, Soviet Union, the UK, France, and China were given the 5 permanent seats on the Security Council when the UN was formed in 1945. Any member of the Security Council could veto anything. One veto from any of those 5, and whatever the proposal was, doesn't matter if every other country in the world voted for it, it died. End of discussion. 4 years after the UN formed, China's Civil War ended. The party that lost the Civil War, that was forced to flee to Taiwan, that was the official UN-recognized government of China. Here it is, Cinderella arriving at the ball. That UN Security Council seat China was given when the UN was formed, according to the rules of the UN, followed the fleeing Chinese government to Taiwan. This small, unremarkable island with a population of a few million, the government having just arrived, that had been ignored for most of history, suddenly had veto power over the entire world, and they would maintain that veto power for 22 more years. until it all spectacularly collapsed in a single day. Who actually represents China? It was discovered was a legitimate but procedural loophole kind of question that could be asked by the General Assembly. Rule 27 in Article 18, matters of representation are decided by the General Assembly where every country has one vote and there is no veto power. In other words, who actually represents China was a question member nations could put to a vote and determine without the Security Council killing the outcome. So they did.
Abstain.
Yes.
Yes.
Nay.
No.
76 yay votes, 53 no votes, 17 abstentions.
The People's Republic of China, who wasn't in the UN at all, how could they be? Taiwan was the official government according to the UN, suddenly was in and had a Security Council seat. The clock is about to strike midnight for Cinderella. Comb through how it was worded, and what you will find is that Taiwan wasn't just removed from the Security Council or the UN, its representatives were declared unlawful rebels to the government in Beijing. Wording that China has pointed to ever since as proof that the UN already settled the Taiwan question. They argue that if the seat was unlawfully occupied, then Taiwan has no legal existence under international law. Your mortal enemy takes your Security Council seat, kicks you out of the UN entirely, and two cleverly worded paragraphs put you into permanent international limbo in one afternoon. This is what kicked off Taiwan's desperate pivot to survival, to erecting what would become known as the Silicon Shield. If you wanted to take that shield away, to break Taiwan's monopoly, these are the three key things you'll want to copy. It's unlikely anyone ever will, but if you wanted to, here's exactly how they built it. Taiwan's famous milk oysters, grown right here, must be shucked as soon as they're pulled out of the water, which is why you will never eat them off the shell in even the highest-end restaurants of the world. Force-fed by the nutrients carried into the ocean by the wall of water that slides off the island every few days, they grow 5 times faster than any other oyster. Compared to the briny, sweet flavor of the oysters we eat off the half-shell, these are creamy, light, and unable to be grown anywhere else in the world. Not for lack of trying, but because no other piece of land is shaped like Taiwan. From above, it looks like a regular island. But look at it from its side, and the extreme geography comes into full view. Just 90 miles across, half of it quite flat. The other half shoots up to a peak of over 9,000 feet, acting as a giant wall for the storms that batter from the west during the summer and then from the east during the winter to drop their rain against. 4 times the amount of rain that falls in London in a year will fall on this island, largely in the mountains where the extremely steep slope and shores that within a matter of hours, 80% of all the rain has rushed right off the island. Excellent for growing milk oysters, terrible for making chips. You know the saying, necessity is the mother of all invention? Whoever said that was probably talking about Taiwan. As precise as the chips in our phones and computer are, it would be unheard of if 9 out of every 10 chips that came out of the factory worked. 8 out of 10 is considered outstanding. Even 7 out of 10 is considered respectable in some cases. For the 3 companies on the cutting edge, Taiwan Semiconductor gets more than 8, Intel maybe 7, Samsung hasn't been able to hit 5. The industry calls this yield. We're going to run a new batch, and we expect the yield to be about 81%. Compared to South Korea or bright, sunny, perfect California, Taiwan has built the world's most advanced industrial process on a tropical, earthquake-prone island with frequent droughts, providing the necessity to invent solutions that over time have not just gotten Taiwan's yield on par with other companies, but dramatically better. A single stray organic molecule in the air or 1% swing in humidity can ruin an entire batch of chips. Taiwan averages 80% humidity. Each chip in the batch, hundreds of thousands of chips per batch, requires 15 gallons of ultra-pure water. And ultra doesn't even cut it as the right word. It's literally, yes, I'm going to use the word literally here. It literally is perfect water. Nothing but hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Taiwan, despite all the rain, has regular droughts. Absolute atomic level stability. There can be zero shaking. Taiwan sits on the ring of fire. 2 tectonic plates produce dozens of medium-sized earthquakes every year and a major one every few decades. The inventions and over-engineering to account for the variability Taiwan experiences are exactly what is meant by aim small, miss small. Taught by every hunter to their children, every coach to player, every military shooting range, you don't just try to hit the target. You pick out the smallest detail you can see in the center of the area you need to hit. That is what you aim at. So that when, not if, but when you inevitably miss, your miss will still be effective, still landing within an area that achieves the goal. But there's something slightly off with this example I just used because Samsung, Intel, Taiwan, they're all shooting at the same goal. They all know where to aim. So let's try this again. Let's run this back. This is the target they're all trying to hit. And this is Intel's environment, very stable. If this is Intel's environment, very stable, then this is Samsung's. And if this is Samsung's in South Korea, then this is Taiwan. After practicing for millions of hours in those environments, over the next million shots when the target is stationary, who do you think hits more targets? What about when the original target is replaced by a smaller one? The next generation chip, and the next generation chip, and the next one, and the next one. Aim small, miss small. If you can keep a cutting-edge chip process stable during a typhoon, a drought, and a magnitude 6 earthquake simultaneously, you have an engineering discipline that competitors in stable climates simply cannot match. And it turns out that going small has one other, dare I say, big advantage. You know the multi-asset investing platform Public? They just launched Generated Assets, a new kind of asset that lets anyone turn their ideas into an investable index using AI. For example, you could type in AI-powered supply chain companies with positive free cash flow, or semiconductor manufacturers with revenue growth over 20% year over year. The AI then searches, screens, and builds a one-of-a-kind index for you to invest in, dispatching a swarm of evaluation agents to analyze thousands of stocks in the process. I've been playing around with it, I've played around with it, and the rationale it gives for each stock pick is genuinely impressive. Plus, you can backtest your ideas against the S&P 500, so you are not going in blind. If you are ready to build a portfolio that actually reflects your thesis, visit public.com/max. You can invest in stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets. They'll even give you an uncapped 1% match when you transfer your investments from another platform. Again, go to public.com/max to check it out. And big thank you to Public for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to it. So many options for how to arrange this one. This is such a good story. Do we start here, or do we start here, all the way backed out? Let's do it. Bring them up. What do these 6 areas all have in common? Each mark represents a small piece of land that you could drive top to bottom or across in under 1 hour. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Detroit, Antwerp, Jura Valley, Hsinchu. These relatively tiny sections of land have all the parts, companies, and people of a single industry so tightly clustered together that at least 50% of all the value created for the global industry comes just from that area. Semiconductors for Hsinchu, watches for Jura Valley, diamonds for Antwerp, film for Los Angeles, software for Silicon Valley, the auto industry in Detroit. Well, 50% of the value used to come from there.
Step inside the thundering iron heart of the Motor City, where a symphony of screaming whistles and clashing steel births the very future of the American road. Watch as a skeleton of cold Michigan ore marches down the line, cloaked in chrome and scorched by fire, transformed in a mere 90 minutes into a gleaming chariot of freedom. It's a mechanical miracle of the common man, a tick-tock triumph where the ticking clock is king. Ticking clock is king. The ticking tick-tock.
From the famous brands like Ford to the suppliers of transmissions, tires, metal stamping, fasteners, all the parts needed to make a car were within a 40-minute drive. Everything about Detroit was about time. It was truly the primary raw material, so much so that to Detroit's efficiency experts, the 60-second minute was a mathematical nightmare. It didn't fit neatly into an accounting column. So they dropped it and adopted stopwatches that divided minutes in 100 segments instead of 60 seconds. Spot a defect? Keep the line going. Put a ribbon in the wrong place? Keep the line going. Made a mistake? Doesn't matter. Keep the line going. The steadier the clock, the more cars that came off the line, the lower the price of a car. That was the heartbeat of Detroit, and that is exactly what Japan had to exploit to begin overtaking American car companies starting in the 1980s, creating an entirely new way of building complex things that Taiwan would copy and make the foundation of how it built semiconductors. Detroit would push cars out of factories with the intention of lowering prices. Lowering prices would increase demand for cars. Japan did the opposite. They only built a car when someone had bought a car, letting demand pull cars out of factories. Spot a defect? Stop the line. Put a rivet in the wrong place? Stop the line. Made a mistake? Stop the line. Cars didn't pile up in huge lots outside the factory. Defects were stamped out early, less rework. An employee could absolutely not hit a button to halt the production line in Ford's plant because they noticed a little bit of stitching was off. Toyota had a cord running straight down the line that stopped the production line. Any employee could and was encouraged to pull it. Put yourself in the two minds of employees in these plants. At Ford, do my job, do it well, good, keep the line moving. Oh, what's that? It's fine. They'll catch it at the end and we'll figure it out when they have a solution. At Toyota, do my job, do it well. Oh, that doesn't look right. Hey John, this weld, it's already cracking. Pull the cord, fix the problem, fix it just in time to prevent it from becoming a major problem. Everything was done just in time. That's what the system is called and what almost every industry uses now. Don't order a year's worth of tires for how many cars you think you're going to build. Take delivery of tires every week or even every day for the exact number of cars that have been sold that need to be built just in time to hand over to the customer. Taiwan is small enough that clustering would have naturally happened, but they took it to an extreme degree intentionally. The father of Taiwan's chip industry, Morris Chang, talked at great length with the father of Silicon Valley, Frederick Terman.
How do we do what you did there?
You cluster, he said. Take your top two universities like Silicon Valley's Berkeley and Stanford. Every piece of your industry wraps around them. So that's what Taiwan did. All located minutes from one another in a purpose-built science park, Tsinghua University, Chiaodong University, number 1 and number 2 in Taiwan, the companies that create the materials needed to make semiconductors, and then 20 chip factories called fabs ranging from the absolute bleeding edge of the technology to mature workhorses. If you count every chip in the world from your toaster to your car, roughly 1 in 5 was born here. Add in the chips from all the fabs in Taiwan, it's 3 of 5. But if you count only the most advanced chips, the market share of Hsinchu Science Park is essentially 100%. It was a very intentional design, definitely not organic. The people that the government forced to move off their land in this area and the surrounding area were not thrilled. 150,000 people in an area dramatically smaller than Silicon Valley work across 530 different companies, equipment and materials, fabrication, testing and quality control, R&D. This campus even has its own power and water system, data network, and rail yard. They then married the campus to the just-in-time system pioneered by their geographic cousins and once rulers from the north. Chips made only when purchased. Inventory never builds up. Every chip shuttles around these massive factories in a little box going through 1,500 steps. One flick of a switch, every box stops moving. There's a problem, let's solve it. Materials don't pile up. Much of what is needed for that day's work, especially gases and chemicals, often arrives the same day, not just in a box or a tank or container, but through a whole specialized pipe system that lets each factory buy the amount of nitrogen, helium, chlorine, whatever they need right now. All of this, coupled with that extreme focus on controlling the environment, is what gives them more than 8 working chips for every batch of 10. 1 or 2 more working chips might not seem like a massive advantage, but over hundreds of millions of chips per year, it is decisive. But there is one more absolutely critical reason why Taiwan pulled way ahead of everybody else. Intel and Samsung are not incompetent, but there is a fundamental way that Taiwan Semiconductor arranges business with its customers that these other companies do not, that makes it the only chip maker companies like Apple, Tesla, Google, and Amazon will work with. Steve Jobs was pissed. He says, I'm going to make this a nuclear war if they don't back down. No, he says thermonuclear war. There's even a speech he gave right around this time, and he never mentioned other brands or anything that would distract from the Apple show. But he puts this slide on the screen that says, Year of the Copycat. And on that slide are a bunch of logos. It was the one right at the top, right in the middle, Samsung. That's who he was really pissed at. And this is something all companies worry about. You have a thing you need to make, right? But you don't make that thing, you just design it. You pay someone else to make it. Kind of like how IKEA gets you to build all of its furniture. No, I'm kidding. That's a different kind of terrible partnership. Jobs was, and I quote, genuinely shocked, infuriated because Apple was paying Samsung for chips. Of course, that meant Apple had to tell Samsung everything about the iPhone. Why do you need chips like this or that? So it was June 2010, yes. Jobs wakes up one morning, goes to work, turns on the TV to watch Samsung present its brand new Galaxy phone to the world, and it looked just like an iPhone. Remember, this was the start of the iPhone days. There was nothing like it until that day. All of it, down to the box it came in, and Jobs was obsessed with the unboxing experience. All of it looked like a direct copy. The software, the rounded edges, the rubber band effect, menus when they were pulled down. When you have to give all the intimate details of your product to another company, it's always in the back of your head. What if they copy this? This is why Apple and all the other major tech companies only buy their most important chips from Taiwan Semiconductor. Intel and Samsung, the only other companies that can make cutting-edge chips, they also design their own chips. Taiwan explicitly does not, will not, started out from the beginning not to compete with its own customers. This is a strategy of neutrality, like Switzerland during World War II. It is the final and critical third piece of the Silicon Shield. Before TSMC, if you wanted to make a chip but didn't own a factory, a fab, you had to go to a company like Texas Instruments, Samsung, Intel, and ask to use their leftover machine time. You were paying your competitor to make your product. If their own chips suddenly became more popular, it would kick you off the line to prioritize their own production. You had to hand over your designs to a company that might decide to borrow your best ideas. No one had done this before. Taiwan Semiconductor was the very first in history to say, we will be the world's best at manufacturing chips, so you can be the best at design. We will not design a single chip. We will only make what designs you bring to us. If they never designed a chip, they would never sell a chip, which meant Apple could pour billions into chip design, hand the design to Taiwan, and never worry Taiwan was going to borrow it. It is the quintessential division of labor, just like Adam Smith hints at in the very first sentence of Wealth of Nations, and boy did it work. There are now thousands of companies that want to design chips, but are not going to build a $20 billion factory that needs to be upgraded every 2 years just to stay relevant. Fast forward a few years, and Apple moves all its chip production to Taiwan. You know what happens when you provide 25% of the annual revenue of a company like Taiwan Semiconductor? Anytime they advance their capabilities, Apple gets the full first year of their factory capacity. Everybody else has to wait in line. The chips are a little bit more expensive that first year as TSMC works out the kinks, but worth it for Apple. They love the arrangement. And of course, because Apple gets first crack, TSMC and Apple basically co-develop each new generation so it can hit what Apple wants for its power and temperature requirements. The example of all examples of an anchor tenant, just like this Apple store on Fifth Avenue in New York. What does this thing remind you of? What an attraction. There's 12,000 square feet of space down those stairs. Why on earth the original designers decided to put a basement on what could otherwise be expensive retail storefront is still debated. Decade after decade, this plaza attached to this very prestigious office building, it lost money. Your average person just was not going to walk down the stairs to see what was down there. So if you couldn't get a tenant in here, the whole value of the building would just stagnate. New owner takes over the building in 2003, goes and has dinner with Jobs. They get a deal done at a fraction of the cost of normal retail space in New York on the corner of Central Park. This is prime New York. This glass cube goes up, crowds form, the value of the GM building triples in 12 years. All because Apple became the anchor tenant, the gravity that would pull other tenants, customers, and businesses right towards it. If you took this store out of here, this building would fall in value by 20 to 25% instantly, at least $1 billion. Apple, as the anchor, pushes Taiwan's technology further. Those leaps attract more designs from other companies. Taiwan invests that money back into the factories. Apple guarantees the new factories will be fully used. It's a flywheel that's moved Taiwan semi years ahead of its two closest rivals. So today, Taiwan is now Switzerland, not for its mountains and guns and secrecy. Companies all over the world from every country, United States, China, Japan, UK, India, Brazil, Norway, Russia, they all rely on this little area, on this tiny little island. Countries may wish production would stop so their enemies wouldn't get chips, but then they wouldn't get chips. You work together and that makes the situation better. Positive sum. One side loses, one side wins. Zero sum. Both sides could lose everything in a conflict that wipes out Taiwan's factories. Negative sum. These dynamics, this complex game around it, how embedded it is in our everyday life. I'm not sure there's a more complex, interesting situation that has ever developed on this planet. This island really should not be this important. One more thing. People keep telling me that I've got to ask people to like and subscribe. So if you liked this, you will love the 24 other videos that we have in our catalog, including the one that's coming out next, how to smuggle 1 million barrels of oil, or the one right before this, where we explore how the wide leg pants trend wasn't actually organic, but it was manufactured. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Like and subscribe.